Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Stephen King's novel, The Institute. I'll go into a brief introduction of the author, talk about the plot without giving any kind of spoilers away, go into what I liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. I've reviewed two other Stephen King novels for the channel. I'll leave links to both of those videos in the comment section below. If you want to know more about Stephen King, you can feel free to check out my reviews of Dr. Sleep or Sleeping Beauty. I go into a little bit of his background there. So I won't touch on it too much there, but just Stephen King is a very well-known horror novelist, primarily horror. I think this is his 61st novel. And this book is The Institute. It centers around a child who is a child genius named Luke. He is 12 years old. He is from Minnesota. He becomes kidnapped. He gets kidnapped and brought to what is known as the Institute, which is a facility where experiments are done on him and other children, children with special powers. And while that is going on, the kind of B story is there is a disgraced police officer from Florida who ends up in a small town in Georgia, and their two stories intersect. So that's a real brief spoiler-free overview of the plot, but those are kind of the two main tracks of the book. What I liked about the book was that the Institute feels very eerie and creepy, unsettling. I think Stephen King does a good job of capturing that feel, as well as kind of the feel of the people who work there, the adults who work there and kind of supervise the children. I think the interactions of the children themselves felt very real. I think he gets the ability for kids to go through really horrible things and kind of move through it and adapt to their surroundings. I think the friendships that they kind of form feels very real and genuine. I thought that there are definitely tense moments of the book that he writes really well, that you kind of feel yourself kind of clenching up at certain parts. I think the ending of the book actually is really interesting because there's several action scenes in the book, but the book kind of ends with an action scene, and then kind of the follow-up to that, that point in it kind of almost enters a philosophical realm that I thought was interesting and a little bit different from Stephen King, where some of the mysteries of the world are kind of revealed a little bit, and in doing so, you kind of see the rest of the book in a little bit of a different light, and I think there is a real philosophical thing that's posed there that I thought was a little bit different than his stuff. I think some of the things that I didn't like as much, the pacing of the book is really a little strange. You kind of start the book focused on the police officer, whose name is Tim, for about 40 or 50 pages, and then for, I'd say, about 300 pages, you follow Luke, the child's story. I think it would have been a little bit better if it had been a little bit more Tim's stuff had been interwoven a little bit tighter into the story, because it does feel a little bit, when you get back to the Tim character, you're trying to remember some of the stuff you haven't really touched on for 200 or 300 pages. This is a kind of a common critique with King's stuff for me, but the dialogue that he writes, especially for some of the children, felt a little off in my mind. And there are definitely times where I would ask myself, would a 12-year-old know this thing? Would a 12-year-old speak this way? Those are kind of the two big things. I'm just going to look to see. There's also just some smaller things. There's a character who's introduced relatively late into the book that was kind of ultimately not really important to the book. There are definitely parts in the book that dragged a little bit. There's probably the second quarter of the book probably could have been tightened up a little bit. I don't think it quite needed to be as long as it was, but I did definitely enjoy it. I would say if you are a Stephen King fan, definitely check this out. If you're a fan of things like The Dead Zone, that was one of the books that I've read of his in the past that definitely I felt elements of that book kind of carry through into this one. If you're a fan of like Stranger Things and that kind of realm of stuff, I think this actually would be a good companion piece to that show. If you're someone who has a hard time with children in peril, this may not be the book for you. There's nothing I would say that's necessarily like gory in this book, but there's definitely, children are definitely hurt and they're definitely put into hard situations. So yeah, that's pretty much The Institute. It's not by far my favorite Stephen King, but I definitely would recommend it because it's a fun read. I read this in 2 or 3 days, and I enjoyed my time reading it. And I think the book gets better as it goes excuse me, gets better as it goes along. I think it's kind of a little bit of a slow going into it. Like I said, maybe that second quarter of the book is a little bit thick and probably could have been whittled down a little bit, and some of the pacing, there are issues. But I think once I got probably past the halfway point, I really definitely picked up for me, and I did enjoy it. There's some plot holes and some things like that you could probably quibble with, but all in all, I enjoyed the book. So that's The Institute. Next time I will be listening to the audiobook of Malcolm Gladwell's new book, Talking to Strangers. So I should have a review on that probably in 2 or 3 days. Should be a pretty quick read, listen. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like it or subscribe to the channel. I will also have the link to those videos below, as well as my link to my Twitter handle if you want to follow me on Twitter. Until next time, bye.